Hi, this is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee, and for today's video, we're back with another Yaesu FT-60 Operator Series video. In the last video, we did a full factory reset on the radio so that it is now in the same condition that your radio would be brand new out of the box with the original factory settings. So what I want to go over today is some of the initial setup items that you're going to want to do from the set menu from the front panel through the set menu. And I'm not going to go over all of the items that appear in the set menu. We'll touch on most of those relevant items as we go through the span of this series. But today I want to go over a few initial things that you're going to want to set up. And in doing so, we'll learn a little bit about how the set menu operates and how to navigate it and how to select different options. So to start off with, we want to turn the radio on. And it made a little beeping sound, and that's one of my first indicators that this is full factory reset, because that's one of the first things that I get rid of, and it's going to be the first thing we do in the set menu. So to get into the set menu, I mentioned it a few times already, but I'll remind you, we're going to first short press the FW key at the lower right hand corner of the front panel, and we're going to follow immediately by pressing the 0 key, and you'll see above that it says set. So it's again short press of the FW key, immediately followed by a short press of the 0 key, and that'll enter us into the set menu. So it goes like this. And now we're in the set menu. And what we're going to do is use the dial at the top of the radio, but you can also use the up-down arrow keys to navigate through, but I prefer to use the dial myself. And we're going to go to item number 6, and that is beep, and that's the first thing that I'm going to change. Now with beep, you're going to have a couple of different options. So first thing I want to tell you though is this is a menu item, so it's menu item number 6, and every menu item in here has a sub menu where you have the different selections that you can make. So to get to the sub menu for item number 6, we're just going to short press the FW key again. And now that takes us into our selections. So this gives us our options here. And as far as options go, we have 3. So the first option is actually key. And what that's going to do is it'll make a beeping sound every time you press one of the keys on the front panel. The next is going to be key and then SC. And what that would do is the radio will beep anytime you press one of the keys, and also every time the radio stops on scan, it'll make a little beeping sound. And then the third option is going to be off, and that means the radio is not going to make any kind of beeps for you. And that's the option that I happen to like. So since we like off, what we're going to do at that point to select that submenu item is we just press FW, and it takes us back to the original menu item. And from there we can navigate to the next item we want to change, or we could exit the menu by just simply short pressing the PTT, and it brings us back to full operation. So let's go back into the set menu again by pressing FW and 0. And we're going to move to the next item that I'm going to be talking about, and that's the lamp. And that's going to be item number 24. And these are alphabetical, by the way, but the problem is some of the acronyms don't really match up with what you're trying to do. But we'll move to item number 24, and that's going to be lamp. And there we're going to press, and I'll show you the different options. Now what lamp controls, or what this menu selection item controls, is the activities of the lamp key when you press it, and that's the lower side key. So as a reminder, the upper is Monty, and the lower is going to be your lamp. And this gives you a couple of different options for when you press that button. So what we're going to do, let's go ahead and press FW again to get to the submenu, and I'll go over the different options here. So the submenu here is we have, first off we have key, and what this is going to do is it's going to cause the lamp to illuminate whenever you press one of the keys, or for instance when you turn the knob. So I'm going to go ahead and just to show you what I'm talking about here, I'm going to go ahead and select this, and then we're going to exit. Now again, hard to see with the lighting situation here, although I can turn a couple of these off. Let's go ahead and do that. Make it a little cozier here. So since we have keys, so if I press one of the keys, the lamp illuminates, which is fine. So that's the down arrow key. Also, when I press the lamp button, it illuminates. And what it's going to do is it's going to illuminate for 5 seconds. And then also, if I turn the knob, you can also see that it illuminates. So that's one option. So let's go back in again to the menu, and let's look at the next option that we have. So the next option we have is 5 seconds. So what this means by 5 seconds, let's go ahead and select that. what we do here is if I turn the knobs, if I press the buttons, the lamp doesn't illuminate. All this affects is that when I press the lamp button on the side of the radio, the lower side key, when I press that, the lamp will illuminate for 5 seconds and then it'll turn itself off. Okay, that's just so-so. But I'm going to show you the one that I prefer the most, and this is going to be the third selection. So let's go to toggle. Now toggle, and I'm going to select this one. This is the one that I actually like. Now I showed you before, and let's go ahead and exit out. I showed you before how you could turn the lamp on by short pressing the button and it would turn on for 5 seconds, or you could hold down the FW key and press the lamp button. Well, what this does is, and then it would illuminate continuously until you hit the button again. But what toggle is it just sort of takes the FW key out of the equation. So when I have it set for toggle, here's how it works. When I press the lamp button, the lamp stays on. And the lamp will stay on until I press that button again and turn it off. So that's actually the one that I like. Before I could, if it was set on 5 seconds, I could just press it and I would only have it for 5 seconds. But sometimes I might want to look at some more details and I don't want to have to press it again. So I happen to like toggle a lot. So on toggle, like I said, you can press that button and it turns that lamp on, or you just turn that off. And then after that, it doesn't illuminate from key presses or anything after that. So you have full control over the lamp. You can have it full on or full off. So there's 3 different options for you to play with. But let's go back to the set menu, and now let's move on to the next thing. And this is going to relate to scan. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my lights back on so we can see the screen a little bit better. There we go. Okay. So the next item that we're going to mess with is item number 35, and that is resume or resume, depending on how French you are. So resume, this relates to scan, and this is going to determine your scan parameters. And you have 3 different options here. So what this means is when you're in scan mode and the radio's scanning, it determines what happens when the radio breaks squelch on an active frequency or memory channel. So let's go ahead and press this and look at the options. So the first one is busy. And what this means is if you have it set to busy, as the radio scans, when it breaks squelch on an active frequency or channel, it is going to hold on that active frequency and channel so long as there is activity on there. So if you have somebody talking, it's not going to break away in the middle of the conversation. It's going to stay with it so long as someone is holding that frequency, that channel, or that repeater. Now, what this also means, though, is if you have some channels like weather channels that broadcast continuously, if it hits one of those, it's going to stay there and it's going to stay there forever. So weather channels are generally something that I would not put on scan myself because they're going to constantly be tying up your scan cycle. So busy is the one that I tend to prefer. That's the one where you're not going to lose that activity, because what you don't want is if it stops on an active frequency, just about the moment you're picking up on the traffic, if it's set to just suddenly move on, you're going to lose that, and sometimes you actually might forget where in the heck it even was to begin with. So busy is the way to go. Hold is more of a search feature. What hold is the radio scans at the moment it breaks squelch on an active frequency or channel. It then holds there, and it will not reinitiate the scan on its own after that. It'll just stay on that channel or frequency, and it won't start scanning again until you actually hit scan and get it going again. So like I said, that's more of a search function than a scan function, really, and it's not terribly practical. And the worst of the 3 is time. And what time is as the radio is scanning, when it comes upon an active frequency or channel, it will hold there for 5 seconds and then it will move on. And the problem with that is if you have this set up so it goes to an active channel or frequency, you're not actively looking at the radio, you're hearing the traffic, but the moment might be something that does interest you, after 5 seconds it just blasts right by and goes to something else. So I'm not aware of too many people that use that particular mode. So as a reminder, the preferred scan method for scan resume is busy. So we'll go ahead and select that. And now let's move on to the next one, which is going to be item number 44, and that's going to be scan lamp. And now what scan lamp is is we were talking about lamp settings earlier, and that had to do with the button here. But one thing this radio doesn't do, or if you have the wrong setting, how about that? Because by default, it is set for on. But if you have this turned off as the radio is scanning, what will happen is when it comes to, when it stops on an active frequency or channel, it doesn't illuminate the screen, and you would have to manually illuminate it then. But this is set to on, and that's what you want to make sure it is. So by default, it's already on, so it might not be something you need to affect. But even though some of these things are defaults, I still like to check them and make sure they're set correctly. So with this turned on, as I said, when you're scanning, when it stops on an active frequency or channel, that lamp will illuminate for about 5 seconds, so you can look up and see what active frequency or channel it just stopped on. So let's move to the next and last item, and there are other things in here that we are going to talk about more. We're going to talk about some things like RF squelch and some other stuff that is a little more intricate, takes a bit more explanation, and might or might not be something you want to get involved in. But the last thing that we're going to want to set up on the radio before we move on to something else is item number 51, and that is our timeout timer. Now, I mentioned when I was talking about the radio in an earlier video that one of the deficiencies of the radio is if you don't have your speaker mic set up correctly, there's the possibility that the speaker mic can pop out just a little bit, and when it does, it creates an open mic situation, the same as if you were actually pressing the PTT and holding it down. And I've actually seen this happen. I don't know if I mentioned that in that video or not, but I've seen it happen, like for real. We had to track somebody down and find them and say, hey, your radio's keyed up, and they're like, no, it's not, and it turned out to be the speaker mic. So the timeout timer is something you're going to want to set, because if that happens, and this is particularly important with the factory defaults, because when we look at the default option for timeout timer, it's 6 minutes. And in my world, that's an eternity's worth of talking. When it comes to HTs, good practice with ham radio in general is keep it short, keep it concise, and keep it clear, especially when it comes to MCOM. Now, I do get that there are people that like to get on the radio and just chat all day long. They call it rag chewing. It's not the world I live in, but I do know that it does occur, and sometimes people get a little chatty. And a common occurrence that occurs on repeaters is people time the repeater out. So they won't know at what point their transmission drops off. But you can also set up a timeout timer on your own radio to sort of restrict your activity, because occasionally, we can get a little too chatty. So what I like to do is set a timeout timer, and the nice thing about this radio is it gives you a little warning. So what will happen with your timeout timer is when the time you've set on the radio expires, about 10 seconds out from timing out, it will actually send an audible tone through the speaker on the radio, so this thing's about ready to time out. And that's particularly nice when you're talking about the speaker mic situation. So it's an audio indicator that you've timed your radio out, and you might know you have a problem. So with the timeout timer, as I mentioned, the default is 6 minutes on this. I'm going to say you might want to turn that down to something a little more reasonable, like maybe 2 minutes. And usually on other radios, if you're familiar with the programming schemes on those, oftentimes it goes in seconds. And I've seen them go all the way up to 5 or 6 minutes in terms of seconds. This is just in terms of minutes. So it's off, it's 1, 2, 3, and it goes all the way up to, believe it or not, it goes all the way up to 30. And that's nuts. And then back to off again. So I like to set this at 2 minutes. So if I'm keyed down for 2 minutes, like I said, as I approach the 2 minute mark, 10 seconds out, this thing's going to send me an audible tone through the speaker as a warning that I'm about ready to time out. But after that, if I exceed that time, what's going to happen is if I'm still holding down the PTT, the radio's going to stop transmitting. And it's not going to reset itself until I release that PTT. But at least what's not going to happen is I'm not going to go too long, overheat my radio, burn out the internals, because that is what happens. If you've ever used an HT for a decent amount of talking, you probably notice that the battery itself starts getting hot. Well, that's just energy transfer. The more energy you're converting from the battery into activity within the radio, that generates heat, and it's not good for the radio, to be honest with you, and it's not good for other people too, especially, as I said, during an MCOM situation. That's a subject of a whole other video that I'm going to be doing, but keeping your conversations clear, concise, and accurate, and short, brief. Don't tie up the frequency. That's kind of important. So there you go. Enough on that. So I've selected 2 minutes. I'm going to hit the FW key and we go back to the menu again. And that's the extent of what I want to do for the initial setup on the radio, but that gives you an idea of a few initial options that you're going to want to set up. And again, as a reminder, anytime you want to exit that menu, just short press the PTT and you're back to the regular screen. So that's a couple of initial setup items, and as I mentioned, it does get you familiar with using that front panel to work the set menu and set a few things up on the radio. There's a lot more that goes into this, and what we're going to do on the next video is we're going to come back and actually program in a simplex memory channel, and you'll see a few of the other set menu items being used in that case, and we'll program in the frequency. We'll turn it into a memory channel, and then we'll name that memory channel. Following that, we'll do a repeater, same thing with a repeater, and we'll do a couple of different repeater types. We'll talk about splits, a few other things. Actually, splits may be a little further down the road because I'm going to do some advanced repeater setups. So if you have odd splits in terms of your PL tones, I'll show you how to do that, and then we'll talk about memory bank operations, and then we'll get into all kinds of other stuff with this. But for today, that's it. That sums it up. So I thank you very much for watching and or listening. This is Scott, Kilo Sierra 6, Delta Alpha Yankee from Visalia, California. Have a wonderful day.